everybody, this is Petra Lohmeyer from Nevelle, and this is the Win-Win Podcast. Now, what do we have today? So, as above, so below, as within, so without, and vice versa. Now, what that means, I will come to in the first part. In the second part, we have some beautiful examples how that relates to win-win situations and how they can be implemented with the science behind it as well. So, as above, so below, as within, so without. How do I start in that? Why should we care about the weak, the small, and the inconsequential? Why should we care about an oiled seagull or a child in Africa dying, be it because of droughts or because of anything else? Well, it may be a no-brainer for a charity worker, and it's a no-brainer for my old friends, but for those on the macro level, it may not be. Why not? They argue, isn't there always collateral damage? Isn't there also always somebody you have to hurt if you want to fix the big stuff? You know, you can't even build a house without killing all the worms underneath and killing all kinds of animals. And a lot of people think that's okay, so why is it not okay on a bigger level? Well, my thought this morning, because I have been exposed to this kind of thought several times recently on several different levels, is what happens if you only care about the big stuff? Now, we've had this before. Very rich people, like billionaires, for example, a lot of times don't care about the poor and the weak. They actually feel some disdain about them. But those who do, and who think that they're really strong when they kill all compassion and all the bleeding heart and all of that inside of them, end up not being very happy about it afterwards. In literature, we have an example for that. That is Scrooge. He wasn't nice to his workers, he wasn't nice to anybody else, and then he's at the top of his game, he's the richest man in town, and he's miserable. And we know of a lot of billionaires, some very famous people who even killed themselves or who are not very happy. That doesn't necessarily mean that money can't buy great things. Money can do great things in the hands of the right people, and if it was made the right way. But sometimes if you make it the wrong way on the way up, then you think you're going to be happy when you're on the way up, when you're at the top, but you really aren't. At least that's what they say. It's not what I say. I'm not a billionaire, so I wouldn't know, but there are people who are at that level and who have reported that. Now, one level up. What I mean with one level up, as above, so below, is a principle out of spirituality, as a lot of you know. It comes, I don't know where it actually comes from, but Theosophy, for example, teaches it as well. So the next level up I would see as the nation now, for example. No, I'm not going straight to the planets and stuff. Next level up, on a national level, what happens if you only care for the bigger whole and not the people? Because that is what would happen there, right? So China, after the Cultural Revolution, did exactly that. So did Russia, and it didn't work so well. America, who cared for where individualism was very much valued, as well as West Germany, actually did a lot better. So now they're doing well, but they had to change their model in between, right? And weirdly enough, you always think that people in systems where the whole, the team is valued a lot and everybody's supposed to contribute to the whole and the individual is not valued, that those would be less selfish people. But turns out, a lot of times you will find that in those systems you have a lot more selfishness, and it's a lot more accepted to be selfish in a way than it is in cultures where individualism is valued. Now, why would that be? That really doesn't seem to make sense. Well, it actually does make sense if you look at the Claire Graves model. And it actually makes sense because if you force people into cooperation and into thinking that the whole is bigger than the individual, then they're basically at the purple level. And the way out of the purple level to develop further is to go to red, which is power god, which is basically being selfish. And then you come to law, then you come to entrepreneurship and all of these things. But that is a different video. So this was actually a really interesting thing for me to see, that it actually didn't work out so well when people on a national level only looked at what is best for the whole, but not for individuals. Now, as below, so above, as above, so below. So if you only care about if you don't care about the poor or the weak or the different in your country, one level up, that looks like nobody's caring about your country if it gets beaten up, right? Because they only care about the strong countries. We may be having something like that, right? There is an opposite model where you care for the detail only. You build from small, and then it's kind of like a yes and improvisation. So you look at the small thing, and in companies, a lot of companies that are really successful nowadays are actually doing that, like software companies that are more like brains or organisms instead of machines, that not from the top down like machines, but brains and organisms who use a lot of project management techniques like Scrum and Agile project management. And they are more creative. They are actually building little things here and that and there, and then those build on what they did, and they built on that. And in the end, it's much more dynamic than from the top down, where nobody is really allowed to be creative. And it is winning against machine structures at the moment, by far. And business, a lot of times also, if you take businesses as a whole, are also a lot of times more successful in building things from the ground up than an organization like a government, which tells people what to do and people then grudgingly follow. But the problem, of course, is if you build everything from the bottom up, it's like a jungle. It's survival of the fittest. It's often just as cruel to the individual as the macro view, where the individual isn't taken into account at all. So without an internal or an external macro structure, it's a jungle, and it's not what most of us want. So what could be an internal structure? An internal structure could be what the Norwegian, somebody in the Norwegian government said at the UN the other day. I saw the speech last night. And that would be called values, of course, right? That's an internal structure that hopefully everybody agrees on. And one of those internal structures is, of course, compassion. There is this wonderful metaphor of the starfish, right? You probably heard it before. It's one of my favorite metaphors, where there's this old man at the beach, and a young man comes along, and he sees the old man. There's the whole beach full of starfish. There was a whole big flood, and there's starfish everywhere, and they're all dying. And there's this old man, and the old man is taking one starfish at a time and putting it back into the sea. And the young man comes up to him and says, "Why are you caring about these starfish? I mean, there's millions out here. You can only save maybe 20, maybe 50, maybe 100. But I mean, what does it matter? It's a drop into the ocean." And the old man, picked up one of the starfish, put it gently into the waves, and said, "It matters to her." And it's a really beautiful example, right? On a human level, of course, it gets a lot more complicated than with animals, because both in the personal and societal space, there's sometimes destructive internal motives and patterns that come to play. So it's not so easy to just help. And sometimes you have to look at it a little bit differently, and it depends on who and how and when to help. And external macro structures are sometimes also needed in form of laws and punishment in order to make this all happen. But the result really is that caring only for the macro level without caring for the tiny lives makes the structure hollow, right? A garden that looks good but has no life is horrible once you realize what's missing. It's an illusion, and once the truth has fully penetrated you, it is an equivalent of hell, of death, of utter loneliness. It's Professor Weston in the book Perelandra by C.S. Lewis, or the Nice Institute in That Hideous Strength, the third book in the same trilogy. It looks great from the outside. It may actually be successful for a while, but there's nothing in it. There's no depth, there's no fulfillment. On a personal level, there's no fulfillment. On a company or a nation level, there's no happiness in the population or in the employees, which you see in quite a few companies who look only at the macro level. Now, in the Bible, there's a quote that God cares even for the littlest sparrow. And that quote is there for a reason. It's Matthew 10, verses 29 to 31. Are not two sparrows sold for a penny, yet none of them will fall to the ground outside your Father's care. And it is there for a reason. Caring only for the micro level, however, makes the whole chaotic. It doesn't rein in the psychopathic and the pathological developments, and while initially beautiful, is eventually the same as cancer taking over the body, or weeds choking all the flowers in the garden, or a human jungle where nobody can trust anybody else without everyone living in fear. As above, so below, as in macro systems, so in smaller systems, on the planetary level, on the national level, on the organizational level, on the human level, is the same as without, so within, just in a different dimension if you think of it. On a human level, caring only for the outer life lets the inner life fall apart. That's the billionaire we talked about before, who didn't care how he made his money and wasn't happy when he got there. Some do, a lot of them don't. Caring only for the inner life lets the outer life fall apart. You see a lot of that in India, where people have a very, very rich inner life, but there's a lot of squalor on the street. Right? If you sit in your apartment all day and meditate all day, then at some point people will take away your furniture. That's Tony Robbins' quote. In the West, that is not possible. In the East, it is sometimes still possible, but it's still, there is an imbalance there, right? So as above, so below, as within, so without, and vice versa. All is connected, and all affects and develops each other. And that's an interesting quote I heard a few weeks ago, I think, was the universe is contained within you. When you change that which is within you, you change how the universe behaves. Now, I thought that's a really weird quote. I mean, it sounds so, well, a little bit stupid, doesn't it? Weirdly enough, it seems to correspond with quantum physics. Turns out that apparently quantum physicists, at least I am told by one, have discovered that on the smallest level, the entire universe is contained. But now we come to the application. So because that is always what I put into these podcasts, is the application of the whole thing, or the idea of the win-win situations between people and nature, and how it can make a profit or how it can benefit people in another way. The first few podcasts were always, how can this make a profit? This time it's a little bit in a different way, as this is a little bit of a different podcast this time. And I found 3 really beautiful examples of how you can implement that. For example, let's take the billionaire equine therapy on traumatized children, including children of a rich executive who has all the money in the world but a sick child, and may not be happy because of that, although he has everything in business that he ever dreamed of. But what becomes important then all of a sudden is that which would have been considered weakness on the way up, people caring in charities for animals first, which are not seen as particularly important for a lot of humans, and those animals then taking care of the weak in somebody's family who is very, very powerful, but can't do anything about the situation on a personal level. So that would be taking care of the outside and taking care of the inside at the same time. Another example, Japanese gardens, Tao. It was not just there for the general population, but for the warriors, for the kings, for the business executive nowadays who also need this kind of balance. So you've got yin and yang, Tao or the Tao, that particular symbol that we all know, and that is masculine and feminine energy. So the garden would be feminine energy, while the warrior is the masculine energy, right? We also have the psychological benefits of pets. Now, I've seen an old people's home in Bracknell in England where they were all fighting over the cat, not because the cat was there, because they all wanted to pet the cat. And also, it has benefits for children, it has benefits for the elderly, it has benefits during downtime, even for big power players. So the macrostructure provides space and protection for the internal blooming and cooperation of kindness. That is how this both fits together. One cannot thrive or is hollow without the other. So now it's coming a bit together again, and now some beautiful examples about equine therapy. Now this is a picture of Believe Ranch Rescue. These are people that I do know, Siri and Beck. They are beautiful people. Siri usually talks at Tony Robbins events. She's a 2 times world. What is she? Siri's wife is an 6 times iron distance champion, and Siri is a 2 times world champion, I believe, in triathlon. Can't find it here at the moment, but they did open a center for horses, and they rescued horses and then turned it also into a healing center as well. And the studies that I have on the side, I believe they are not related to this particular center. There are lots of them out there, but it is really interesting to see how nature can benefit humans, even those humans who want to be very, very powerful and may not actually appreciate it, but maybe they just don't know what's out there. So I am now, with this podcast, bringing out a few things that maybe some people are not aware of, because they never actually focused on it and just focused on power. So one study is therapeutic horseback riding in children and adolescents with ASD. And the psychological implication and benefits are enhanced emotional regulation, less irritability, hyperactivity, better social interaction, communication abilities, improvements in expressive language. There's another study with equine-assisted psychotherapy for children who experienced intra-family violence. The citations you will find at the end, I will put all of these studies in a slide at the end, and the psychological implications and benefits here were improved overall psychosocial functioning, less impairment in day-to-day life, boosts in self-esteem, confidence, likely since functioning rose, and possibly stronger effects in young children and those with severe early adversity. These are all peer-reviewed studies, real scientific studies that this works, that animals can actually help. If we help the animals, we save the animals, they can actually really save people afterwards. And a very nice film of Robert Redford, who was in the news just recently, was The Horse Whisperer, if you remember it. The younger of you may not remember that film anymore. It was an absolutely beautiful film, and I would watch it if you've never seen it before. The gardens, benefits of nature as meditation aid, for example. Psychological benefits of meditating and performing horticultural nature-based mindfulness activities in green settings. That was a study. What they did is they recruited 60 caregivers and their children with atopic dermatitis in Korea. They ran a therapeutic gardening program in urban gardens, and the children and parents participated in gardening and nature-related activities over time. The findings, the psychological effects for children were significant decreases in depressive feelings and reduction in behavioral disorders. For caregivers, it was increased parenting efficacy, relief of stress, improved quality of family life, and satisfaction with life. So the relevance to meditating in nature and gardens is, though the study is rather about gardening rather than formal meditation, although you can see gardening as a form of meditation, is that it shows that engaging with nature in a garden setting yields substantial psychological benefits: less depression and anxiety, better well-being, improved family interactions. There's also another study that found that children at about 8 years old performed a plant-related task versus playing a mobile game for 5 minutes, and physiological measures, heart rate variability, skin conductance, etc., and emotional self-report skills were used. And they found that compared to the mobile game, the plant horticultural activity led to decreases in sympathetic arousal, skin conductance, increases though marginal in parasympathetic activity, plus improved feeling, comfort, in other words, comfort, naturalness, relaxation, cheerfulness, lower depression, and anxiety. So this is just gardening. Now we've got wood bathing and forest bathing. There's an effect of forest bathing trips on human immune function. So this isn't just psychological, this is immune function. And what they did is trips into the forest were assessed for effects on immune function, measured natural killer NK cells in intracellular levels of anti-cancer proteins after exposure to phytoncides, volatile compounds from trees. Now, apparently, there are these compounds from trees that are then in the air. If you walk through the wood, and I've seen that in a different study, if you walk through the woods, these chemicals from the trees are in the air, you breathe them in, and they're actually good against cancer. Isn't that amazing? The findings are it significantly increased NK cell activities, or cell Ks are the killer cells against cancer, and increased levels of those intracellular anti-cancer proteins after forest exposure. Also, forest bathing again reduced stress hormone levels, which is of course important for the immune system, as we all know, and sympathetic nervous system activity, increased parasympathetic tone, which may also support immune regulation. And there's also another study. So all these studies are in the back again. Now we've got another study. I looked, this ChatGPT is just really helpful, right? I used to have to look forever for these studies when I was studying law, and I had to do some sort of scientific review for something. And nowadays you just put into ChatGPT what you've read years ago, and it just finds it for you in a few seconds. So here we have something interesting, that is electromagnetic grounding, earthing effects, body feet contact with earth on natural surfaces. Now a lot of people think that this is some sort of voodoo stuff, that they don't really take seriously, although it is reported and talked about in rather major events, and there are even companies who have produced machines that are basically doing the same and are just incredibly expensive. But they basically, what it means is if you walk on the ground with bare feet, not with sneakers, but with bare feet, or you lie on the ground for a certain amount of time, that it's supposed to be really beneficial for the body. So here it's more controversial, but there are peer-reviewed studies that show physiological changes when humans are grounded. So grounded meaning being on the earth and with direct contact to the earth. And there are also a couple of studies. In this particular study, study A, adults were divided into 2 groups, walking in sneakers versus walking barefoot on forest trails, approximately 20 sessions over 5 weeks. And they measured CRP, an inflammatory marker, IFN gamma, a marker associated with immune system activity, particular NK cell activity, and serotonin levels. And what they found is the barefoot group had statistically increases in serotonin, and the happiness hormone, right? For inflammation, the barefoot group had a lower CRP after 20 sessions compared with baseline in those with elevated starting CRP. The sneaker group did not show such favorable changes. And the IFN gamma increased early in both groups. Changes plateaued mid-program. So study B, Earthing Health Implications of Reconnecting the Human Body to the Earth's Surface Electrons. It's a review of research about grounding and earthing, touching the earth directly or via conductive connection, and it reported effects such as improved sleep, reduced pain, decreased stress, more balanced autonomic nervous system activity, shifts in blood parameters, and other findings. And there's another study C, the measured electronic potential in body and in venous blood when subject is in contact with ground versus insulated, found that grounding leads to shifts in potentials approximately minus 200 millivolts when contact is made, suggesting that contact with the earth changes electrical environment of the body. Isn't that fascinating? A lot of people who laughed about people hugging trees may not be laughing anymore because there's actual science behind this now. I absolutely love this. And of course, since I am a pet lover and since I am an animal lover, I also looked at the health benefits of pets, and there are 3 studies. Again, you will find all of the citations in the back in the last slide. Study 1, dogs and immune development. Effects of dog ownership and genotype on immune development and atopy in infancy. I think that's how you pronounce it. What they did, they studied 285 infants, assessing pet exposure, especially dogs in the home, cytokine secretion profiles, and markers of atopy, allergic disease, allergen-specific, like dermatitis, for example, in the first year of life. And they also examined how the CD14 genotype, a locus associated with innate immune response, modulated the effects. And the findings and benefits, what's really important here is infants exposed to dogs had reduced allergen sensitization and significantly less atopic dermatitis compared to unexposed infants. So it's good to have your children around these animals. And yes, the animals may be a little bit dirty. That's the whole point. The child gets used to it and the immune system gets used to it. At least that is what I heard before already. Dog exposure was associated with higher levels of IL-10 and IL-13 cytokines at age 1 year, and IL-10 is an anti-inflammatory immunoregulatory. And the protective effect was influenced by genotype, meaning the genetic variation modified how beneficial dog exposure was. So in other words, your dog is good for your kid's immune system. Health benefits of pets study 2, dogs and psychological immune response. This time it's about petting the dog. And 55 college students randomly assigned to 3 groups, petted a live dog, petted a stuffed dog, and just said comfortable. And finding and benefits, only the group that petted a live dog showed increase in salivary IgA, which is an immune molecule important in mucosal defense. It indicates that brief interaction with the dog can enhance parts of the immune system and so could help with resistance to infection or increased immune vigilance. It also suggests psychological benefits. Interacting with a live animal seems more beneficial than a toy or passive setting. Isn't that interesting? And study 3, cats, of course. I need to have some cats as well. I've got one over there right now. And psychological and physiological effects. So physiological effects as well. What they did, they observed daily interactions between cat owners and their cats in a domestic setting and measured multiple physiological markers, cortisol, oxytocin, heart rate variability, plus emotion, self-reported during and after the interaction. And the finding and benefits are cat interaction correlated with improved physiological state, lowered stress measured with cortisol, increased oxytocin. Oxytocin is the love hormone, basically, right? Changes in heart rate variability constant with relaxation. which is, of course, good for the body. Owners reported more positive emotional states. The interaction seems to activate both the autonomic nervous system, so relaxation and the parasympathetic activity, and emotional bonding pathways. Suggests that even routine contact with cats, not just one big event, can have measurable benefits for stress regulation and emotional well-being. Now, isn't that interesting? So I basically included this time because I've been saying this the whole time, but I never backed it up. So this time you actually have some scientific findings of why having pets at home, why interacting with animals, why going into nature is directly beneficial for humans, provided they have the right mindset for it as well. Because one study also showed, which I'm going to see if I can find after this podcast and include at the end, that if you have allergies, for example, a lot of times it has nothing to do with the animal. A lot of times it has to do with fear, because people, when they have allergies, they're just afraid of something. Some may have a trauma about something and there was an animal just close to it. Some may have seen an animal dying when they were young. In all cases, it can be the case that they just simply tighten the muscles here in the throat. And I know that because I used to have asthma as well. I used to have asthma in all kinds of situations. And then I read this study where it basically said that 60% of those people who have asthma, they don't actually have asthma. They are just afraid that they may get asthma, and then they tighten the muscles here, or they are stressed and they unconsciously tighten the muscles down here in the throat. And when they learn to relax it, either the asthma goes completely away or it reduces significantly. So this may also help some of you who are so afraid that when they see some animal or they see some pollen, that it's all going to get so bad again. And it gets bad every time. Yeah, it gets bad every time because you're afraid. Once you learn to relax that, it may actually go away. And not always, obviously, but it may help some of those who may have a problem with that. And I find a lot of times, even when I usually don't get allergic reactions at all anymore, not to cats, not to pollen, not to hay, not to any of the other things that I had allergic reactions before. I only get allergic reactions when I ate the wrong stuff. When I eat cheese, for example, and not just once, but several times, then suddenly I get allergic against everything. Everything can trigger it, and then I do these allergy tests, and then, these prick tests, and suddenly allergies show everywhere. But once I stop eating the cheese, I don't have a problem with it. I actually lived in Valencia during COVID. I was stuck in a campground where they shut me in for 2 months, and then I saved all these animals there, all these little kittens, and at some point I ended up with 6 kittens in a caravan and 2 rabbits, and the rabbits were underneath my bed, and I had the hay for them there. All things that I used to be allergic against, and I had absolutely no problem because I was eating the right stuff. So that may also be something that may be an issue for some people. Now, last night I actually ate some cheese, and guess what? I am allergic against something again, which is probably the cheese. So be careful not to blame something that may have absolutely nothing to do with the issues that you have. And sometimes the issues that you have may also be a blessing, because you find out that something else that you actually didn't think about is actually bad for you, and you can stop doing it. If you have pain, the point is not to stay in the pain, but to get out of the pain. Pain is a signal that something is wrong. And a lot of people bathe in the pain a lot of times without really finding out what the real cause of it is. And if it's not an animal, then please don't blame the animal. That would be really, really lovely and would make the life of a lot of pet owners a lot easier. Because there's a lot of anxiety relating to that as well, and a lot of stress relating to people blaming their pets for things that they haven't done. Anyway, so there are a lot of really good benefits with animals, a lot of good benefits of nature, which should help people want to take care of it. And that is the whole point, right? So this was the Win-Win podcast. Again, this is Petra Lohmeyer, and I hope that you have a lovely week and see you next week.